which is an increase of over 1.5 trillion from the previously estimated using the old reference prices. The forecast revenue is now 18.32 trillion, which is higher than the 2023 revenues, including that provided in the two supplementary budgets. Equally and commendably, the deficit is lower than that of 2023. Two of the important decisions was to use an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, and also a benchmark crude oil reference price of $77.96, meaning $4 more than the earlier approval. This will significantly increase revenue.
There was financing of $1 billion, concessional financing, 25 years, 8 years moratorium at about the same 4.2% per annum, which was approved by the African Development Bank for this administration. And really, it was a recognition of the macroeconomic measures that have been taken,
which is an increase of over 1.5 trillion from the previously estimated using the old reference prices. The forecast revenue is now 18.32 trillion, which is higher than the 2023 revenues, including that provided in the two supplementary budgets. Equally and commendably, the deficit is lower than that of 2023. Two of the important decisions was to use an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, and also a benchmark crude oil reference price of $77.96, meaning $4 more than the earlier approval. This will significantly increase revenue.
There was financing of $1 billion, concessional financing, 25 years, 8 years moratorium at about the same 4.2% per annum, which was approved by the African Development Bank for this administration. And really, it was a recognition.
A very warm welcome to you today on the show, and as always, it's nice to have you join us. This is Political Spectrum coming to you live from Uyo, the state's capital, and I remain your host, Onuese Ehinoma Olusegun. Now, as the month gradually winds to an end, the year is also on its way out, because in few hours we should be in the last month of the year. We want to thank our viewers for being with us throughout the year as we continue to monitor, report, and analyze activities of government and how it shapes the future of our people. Thank you so much. As we have promised, we will never take your viewership of our dear political program, Political Spectrum, for granted. Now, first on President Tinubu's administration's calendar, today is November 29th. It's a Wednesday, 2023, a sunny day, and it marks exactly 186 days of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in office as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. This is now exactly 6 months and 4 days as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Now, we understand that anytime from now, if we get the live stream, the president will be addressing the joint National Assembly, that's the Senate and the House of Reps, on the presentation of budget. Today, Wednesday, the president will present 2024 appropriation bill at the joint session of the Senate and the House of Representatives, according to the memo from the presidency. Now, this is according to a memo dated November 27, 2023, signed by the Federal Legislature's Secretary of Human Resources and Staff Development, Shaibu Meina Burma, on behalf of the clerk to the National Assembly. And it reads, I am directed to inform you that the 2024 budget would be presented by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria at the joint session of the Senate and the House of Representatives on Wednesday, 29 November 2023. It read, briefing State House correspondents shortly after the Federal Executive Council meeting at the Presidential Villa, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Abubakar Gbagudu, said it revised the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal policy to use an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, and also a benchmark crude oil reference price of $77.96 per barrel. Now, according to Bagudu, the FEC, that's the Federal Executive Committee, also approved an appropriation bill for 2024 with an aggregate expenditure of 27.5 trillion naira, an increase of over 1.5 trillion from the previously estimated budget. Now, he also noted that using the old reference prices, the forecast revenue is now 18.2 trillion, which is higher than the 2023 revenue, including that provided in the two supplementary budgets, in which the deficit is lower than that of 2023. I don't know. I think my producers have the original copy of the letter transmitted to the National Assembly. We are not in any doubt, because as the president is going to be presenting the budget to a joint session of the National Assembly, we also understand the profile and the weight of the Nigerian external debt. That profile will hit $51.59 billion. You can do the math. As President Bola Tinubu also yesterday sought the National Assembly approval for fresh $8.6 billion and 100 million euros foreign loans. Now, the president's request is part of the external borrowing plan for 2022 to 2024 for critical infrastructure, such as power, roads, water, railway, health. The country's external debt stock as at June 2023, according to data from the Debt Management Office, stood at $43.159 billion, while its domestic debt stock is 54.13 trillion in naira. Analysis of the external debt showed that multilateral borrowing gulped 20.79 billion, bilateral and 5.518 billion commercial, and 15.618 billion promissory notes, 931 million and 300 million. Meanwhile, Nigeria's total public debt, domestic and external, as at June 2023, which is second quarter, stood at 87.379 trillion. Now, President Tinubu also forwarded to the National Assembly for consideration the Federal Capital Territory Supplementary Budget, and as we had announced earlier, will officially present the 2024 appropriation bill to a joint session of the National Assembly today. The letter for the request was read by the President of the Senate, Senator Goodwill Akpabio, and Speaker of the House of the Representatives, Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, PhD, at plenary yesterday. And the letter reads, and I quote, I write in respect of the above subject and to submit the attached federal government 2022 to 2024 external borrowing plan for consideration and early approval for the National Assembly to ensure prompt implementation of the projects. The Senate may wish to note that the past administration approved a 2022-2024 borrowing plan by the Federal Executive Council held on May 15th in 2023. The project cuts across all sectors with specific emphasis on infrastructure, agriculture, health, water, supply, road security, and employment generation, as well as financial management reforms. All right, still within the presidency, bank recapitalization. Now, presidency backs CBN investors rush for mega bank stock. And then investors already injecting 110 billion into UBA, FBNH, Zenith Bank, Access, other stocks in just 2 days. That's 48 hours. Now, presidency on Tuesday expressed support for the banking sector consolidation initiative of the Central Bank of Nigeria, saying it would help the country to grow the economy to a new height. Now, this came barely 5 days after the CBN said it would ask banks to raise new capital. According to the presidency, it has become important to consider the capital adequacy of Nigeria's bank in light of the projected $1 trillion economy within 8 years. Of course, you recall. Now, in the last few months, First Bank of Nigeria Holdings, Wema Bank, and Jais Bank have proposed rights issues, while Fidelity Bank has announced plans to raise additional capital via the issuance of 13,200 billion ordinary shares via 13.2 billion ordinary shares via public offer and rights issues. Now, it was gathered that Wema Bank would commence its rights issues on the 1st of December. Now, already players in the capital market have expressed varied views as to capability of the market to support the proposed recapitalization drive, while the doyen of the Nigerian Exchange Limited, Rashid Yusuf, in his comments, believed the local purse could support such a major capital raise, even without the presence of foreign investors. The managing director of AfriInvest Securities Limited, Ayodeji Ebo, expressed doubts that the capital market could support the recapitalization. Now, he says, and I quote, "The Nigerian capital market may not be able to fully support the recapitalization of the banks, given the market is currently being driven by domestic investors. Now, to also achieve this, the bank must adopt technology to drive the capital raise process, as we saw during the MTN public offer," Ebo added. Now, we believe if the foreign exchange policy is clear and consistent in the medium term, we expect to begin to attract FPIs to the capital market. Meanwhile, some minority stakeholders community have expressed the conditions under which they will support the financial institutions. Mr. Boniface Okeze of the Progressive Shareholders Association of Nigeria said that minority investors must do their due diligence and invest in stocks with track records. Let's take a listen to Yemi Cardoso, the CBN governor, at a dinner gala when he announced that banks would need to raise their financial capital.
Difficult decisions regarding capital adequacy. As the first steps, the central bank will be directing banks to increase their capital. Technology will continue to play a critical role in delivering financial services and enhancing financial inclusion. However, recent developments in the payment services landscape have raised concerns regarding the use of technology and the existing licensing and regulatory framework. We have observed that some licensees are operating outside their approved activities, breaching the boundaries set for them. Any intentional or unintended non-compliance will be subject to sanctions, as operators have the responsibility to ensure that they are licensed for the activities they undertake. Concurrently, as we conduct a comprehensive review of the licensing framework for payment services, we will engage in extensive consultations to develop a new regulatory and compliance framework that is suitable for the technology-driven payment services sector. Looking ahead for the industry, banks should reassess their responsible banking framework to ensure that the requirements are effectively integrated into the strategies. I'm aware that some banks have made commendable progress in this regard. Furthermore, the Central Bank of Nigeria is taking steps to enhance its in-house capacity so that it can assist other banks that still have progress to make in implementing their sustainability principles. Distinguished guests, while macroeconomic indicators are valuable in assessing performance, I'm equally concerned about the well-being of the average citizen. The plight of the hard-working masses in our urban centers and villages is a pressing concern. We must ask ourselves, is there a potential future where a brilliant and motivated teenager from anywhere in Nigeria could attend a future anniversary dinner instead of being drawn into outlawed militant groups or extremist ideologies? Likewise, recognizing the pivotal role that women play as critical players in the economy, one cannot overlook the significant impact that providing them with opportunities can have on Nigeria's economic advancement. To address this, we need to develop stronger frameworks for measuring the human conditions.
All right, there you have it. The last time we had a bank recapitalization was under Professor Chukwuma Soludo as CBN governor under the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo. As at then, the arguments were that our banks, as at that point, were just glorified bureau de change. But as we speak now, a lot of people have criticized this. Why a need for recapitalization? Are banks not possessed with enough liquidity? Attention should be more on the central bank rather than the commercial banks, because it is believed that the commercial banks are doing as much as they can. But those are arguments that we're probably going to expand in the line of our conversation. Let's move to the next one. This is about the Nigerian Senate. Now we understand that the Nigerian Senate has invited Dangote Refinery, NIPCO, and 13 other companies to explain how a whopping 120 billion naira central bank fund was spent. The Nigerian Senate has invited 15 companies, including Dangote Oil Refinery, NIPCO Gas Limited, and NIPCO PLC, to explain how they spent over 120 billion naira intervention fund disbursed to them by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, the Senate, in a memo to the company signed by Senator Jarigbe, Chairman Senate Committee on Gas, on Tuesday, said the companies are beneficiaries of the disbursement from the Nigerian Gas Expansion Program, NGEP, also known as NGEP. Now, intervention fund by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, the invitation said they must appear on Thursday, November 30th, which by my calendar should be tomorrow, at a meeting room in the National Assembly complex. Now, companies who are beneficiaries of the disbursement from the Nigerian Gas Expansion NGEP Program Intervention Fund by the Central Bank of Nigeria are invited to an investigative hearing with the Senate Committee on Gas. Now, let's look at the companies. We have NIPCO Gas Limited to come and explain for 25 billion naira. We have NIPCO PLC, 5 billion naira. We have Hyde Energy Limited, 2 billion. We have Lee Engineering and Construction Company, 15 billion. We have Pinnacle Oil and Gas, FZE, 10 billion. Transit Gas Limited, 8 billion. Amalgamated Oil Company Nigeria Limited, Amocon, 5 billion. Gas Nexus Limited, 10 billion. First Modular Gas Systems Limited, 4.3 billion. Nova Gas Limited, 1 billion, all in Naira. 11 Greenfield Liquefied Natural Gas Company, 10 billion. APLPG Limited, 8 billion Naira. And Dangote Oil Refinery, 5 billion Naira. And then we also have Delta State Government coming to explain for 20 billion Naira. We have MOB Integrated Services Limited, 2.5 billion. And now the invited companies are required to appear with their progress reports stating location of projects and the current status of the projects. The meeting is scheduled as follows. Thursday is the date, 30th November. The time is 2 p.m. Meeting room is 107 New Senate Building, National Assembly Complex, Abuja. Now recall that in a recent related development, media had on November 23rd reported that the Senate committee probing the rehabilitation of the country's 4 refineries threatened to demand for dismissal and trial of senior officials of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited, NNPCL, and other relevant agencies for shunning its invitation. This has been a constant recurring complaint. Now, the chairman of the committee, Senator Issa Jibrin, had issued a threat following the failure of the senior executives of the NNPCL and other agencies to appear before it. Now, the agencies, he said, were those involved in the turnaround maintenance projects of refineries. Some of the agencies whose chief executive officers failed to turn up at the session but sent representatives included NNPCL, Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, that's NMDPRA, and Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, and others. Now, the senator noted that from 2010 till date, over 12 trillion naira has been spent on the rehabilitation of the refineries, yet none of them was functional. Now, he said, and I quote, "We will ask for refund and dismissal of all the chief executives involved in the turnaround maintenance." Jibrin said that for weeks they had been asking for documents which had not been given by the oil companies, a development that created suspicion. He says again, and I quote, "We sent them an invitation more than 2 weeks ago requesting for the documents, and the documents have been released after 2 weeks. So the documents have not been released after 2 weeks. So we want the chief executives to be present." More worrisome is that between 2010 and 2020, the sum of 4.8 trillion naira was said to have been spent as operational expenses. We know that we will not hesitate to escalate it to the highest possible level, including the possibility of refund and outright dismissal of some of the heads of some of these agencies and possibly go to jail, Jibrin had said. But here you have it. Some few days ago on this edition, we announced that Mele Kyari, the group chief executive officer of NNPCL, has been retained, and a few new persons have been appointed. So the issues are, is it that there could be some undertone rifts between the Senate and the executives as per why some of the senior officials will not appear before it, so that the National Assembly will be able to perform its oversight functions of investigating and making inquiries into spendings of public funds and how loans or even overdrafts have been administered. All these and more will form part of our conversation. Remember that even yesterday we followed up on SERAP asking states to suspend loans to 36 states over the misspending, and SERAP has also revealed the total public debt portfolio for the country's 36 states and the federal territory, which is 9.17 trillion according to the Debt Management Office. Now, the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project has called on the World Bank to suspend issuing loans to Nigerian 36 states over allegations of mismanaging public funds, which may include loans obtained from the institutions. Now, in a letter dated 25 November 2023, the group specifically wants the bank's president, Ajay Banga, to promptly, transparently and effectively conduct an investigation into the spending of loans and other facilities by the country's 36 states governors, and also to suspend any loans and funding if there is relevant admissible evidence of mismanagement or diversion of public funds by any of the states. Now, it also asked the Global Bank to suspend further applications for loans and any other funding to the 36 states until these states can satisfactorily explain details of spending of loans and other facilities obtained from the bank and its partners. Now, this was disclosed in a statement on Sunday by SERAP Deputy Director Kolawale Oludare. The World Bank and its partners cannot continue to give loans and other fundings to these states where there are credible allegations of mismanagement of diversion of public funds, the statement had read. I continue on the statement. We're concerned that there is a significant risk of mismanagement or diversion of funds linked to the bank's investment in many of the country's 36 states. It is neither appropriate nor responsible lending to give loans to these states only for the loans to be misspent. Now, citing data from the Nigerian Debt Management Office, the group said the total public debt portfolio for the country's 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory is 9.17 trillion. It also said the federal government's total public debt portfolio is 78.2 trillion, whopping 78.2 trillion naira. Now, SERAP also urged the World Bank chief to demand express commitment from the Nigeria's 36 governors to address credible allegations of the mismanagement or diversions of public funds in their states. Now, I don't know if my producer is there. Let's just take a look from the National Bureau of Statistics. There are slides according to states, the domestic and external debts. Let's see which states are top on the table. Debts as per quarter 2. Abia, okay. The National Bureau of Statistics probably arranged it in somewhat of an alphabetical order. I would have expected that they arranged it according to the size of debts. You can see 3 columns, one for states, the second being the external debt stock, and the third being the domestic debt stock. If you take a look at each of the states, you will see that the debts accrued, some are already running into trillions of naira. According to the MBS, Lagos has the highest debt profile, both domestic and external, running into trillions of naira. And then you begin to wonder, are there actually modalities and structures for repaying back these debts, or the states are just in a frenzy or in a frolic of appearing before the National Assembly to ask, or their respective state assemblies to ask for loans without a proper repayment plan? All right, there you have it. Some of these slides will also be used during the conversations. We'll take a break now. Thereafter, we'll be asking our guest, who's a development consultant and a public policy analyst, who will be joining us virtually from the state capital, Abuja, to help us make sense of all of this. If you're just tuned in, it's Political Spectrum on Spectrum Television. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
an increase of over 1.5 trillion from the previously estimated using the old reference prices. The forecast revenue is now 18.32 trillion, which is higher than the 2023 revenues, including that provided in the two supplementary budgets. Equally and commendably, the deficit is lower than that of 2023. Two of the important decisions was to use an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, and also a benchmark crude oil reference price of $77.96, meaning $4 more than the earlier approval. This will significantly increase revenue.
There was financing of $1 billion, concessional financing, 25 years, 8 years moratorium at about the same 4.2% per annum, which was approved by the African Development Bank for this administration. And really, it was a recognition of the macroeconomic measures that have been taken,
which is an increase of over 1.
We must make difficult decisions regarding capital adequacy. As the first steps, the central bank will be directing banks to increase their capital. Technology will continue to play a critical role in delivering financial services and enhancing financial inclusion. However, recent developments in the payment services landscape have raised concerns regarding the use of technology and the existing licensing and regulatory framework. We have observed that some licensees are operating outside the approved activities, breaching the boundaries set for them. Any intentional or unintended non-compliance will be subject to sanctions, as operators have the responsibility to ensure that they are licensed for the activities they undertake. Concurrently, as we conduct a comprehensive review of the licensing framework for payment services, we will engage in extensive consultations to develop a new regulatory and compliance framework that is suitable for the technology-driven payment services sector. Looking ahead for the industry, banks should reassess their responsible banking framework to ensure that the requirements are effectively integrated into the strategies. I'm aware that some banks have made commendable progress in this regard. Furthermore, the Central Bank of Nigeria is taking steps to enhance its in-house capacity so that it can assist other banks that still have progress to make in implementing their sustainability principles. Distinguished guests, while macroeconomic indicators are valuable in assessing performance, I'm equally concerned about the well-being of the average citizen. The plight of the hard-working masses in our urban centers and villages is a pressing concern. We must ask ourselves is there a potential future where a brilliant and motivated teenager from anywhere in Nigeria could attend a future anniversary dinner instead of being drawn into outlawed militant groups or extremist ideologies? Likewise, recognizing the pivotal role that women play as critical players in the economy, one cannot overlook the significant impact that providing them with opportunities can have on Nigeria's economic advancement. To address this, we need to develop stronger frameworks for measuring the human conditions and ensure that policymakers and business leaders pay as much attention to these measures as they do to macroeconomic indicators. This means tracking indicators such as access to food, shelter,
All right, many thanks for staying tuned. And if you're just tuned in, it is Political Spectrum on Spectrum Television. We're going to be discussing a lot of issues surrounding our national political economy today. Of course, anytime from now, we expect that Tinubu should be addressing a joint session of the National Assembly on the issue of the 27.5 trillion naira budget. All right, I've been informed that my guest is fully ready, that has joined us virtually from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. No other but Mr. Jide Ojo, who is a development consultant and a public policy analyst and also a columnist of very, very numerous numbers of popular national newspapers. Good morning to you, Mr. Jide.
Good morning, Shagun. It's a pleasure.
Nice to see you. I like the ambience of the place you are sitting down. It looks like an executive ambience. And how is Abuja today?
Abuja is fine. We thank God.
All right. You've been following. I'm sure you saw the last video when the CBN governor was directly or indirectly making executive decisions as per increasing the capital base of banks. Before we go into the nitty-gritty, you don't need to be an economist to be able to perceive what you think should really be the major germane issues to be discussed. Do you think at this point in time the commercial banks need to recapitalize? Let's start from there.
Thank you very much, Shagun. I think the needful have to be done to ensure the survival of depositors' funds. What I read earlier on was that many of these money deposit banks are owing CBN huge sums of money. in terms of loans that they have taken in order for them to remain solvent. And unless you recapitalize, one day we may end up having a collapse of this bank. And if they do collapse, it's the depositors' fund that will be trapped. And we have that under this issue of recapitalization did happen under former CBN governor Chukwuma Soludo.
Exactly.
I think
Under
around
Obasanjo's
2008.
administration, yes.
Yes. And you could see that that's why Nigerian financial system is robust after the recapitalization. So at that time, they were asked to recapitalize to 25 billion. And what we learned now is that actually about 10 of these money deposit banks are now having trillions in terms of their capitalization. But there are some others that are not pulling their weight and needed to be made to recapitalize, because all said and done, it's a vicious circle, Shegun. It's a vicious circle to the extent that federal government is also owing many of these money deposit banks huge sums of money, which it has failed to pay back and serviced. And that has affected the liquidity.
Yeah.
And that has affected the liquidity of these banks.
Exactly.
Because situations where federal and state government goes to, you need to see the debt configurations of how much federal and state or subnational entities are owing our money deposit banks. It's very huge.
I think as the conversation continues, my producer should be showing those slides of domestic and foreign debts. We have the slides.
Okay. So if you look at that slides, you'll find out that federal government and state governments are actually culpable in the non-solvency of some of these banks, because situations where you borrow from these money deposit banks, either to pay salaries or to fix infrastructures, and you fail to service these debts and also pay back when due, you are also contributing to the non-solvency of some of these banks. And the right thing to do would be, in the face of recapitalization, which I quite agree that it's necessary to recapitalize, we also must put the blame where it is, which is, some of those who owe these banks huge sums of money and have refused to pay. Some of these debts, as you will know, Shegun, are now being classified as bad debt. Bad debt that has now been taken over by AMCOM, because those who borrowed from those banks have refused to pay or honor their payment schedule. So we are in a very huge and big dilemma, given the fact that, yes, some of these banks also are themselves very guilty of not doing the needful. How can you borrow money out without collateral? Some of the bank loans are not collateralized, they are not securitized. And so when whoever borrows, whether it's state, company, or individual, when they fail to meet their repayment obligation, it affects the liquidity of these banks. But to the main issue at play, I quite agree that there should be recapitalization to enable the banks to remain solvent. And the interesting thing is that the issue of merger and acquisition that have now entered our political lexicon in 2013 were first started by the banks under Chukwuma Soludo as CBN governor, where there was a merger and acquisition of some banks that are distressed. And under Buhari, we also know that some of those banks have been sold and recapitalized. One of them was, I think, Skybank.
Yeah.
That was sold and then
And then we have Polaris Bank. But Mr. Jide, still on this argument, Mr. Jide, still on this argument, I quite like the fact that you said, yes, it is good to recapitalize, to give some kind of succor and security to the funds of the average Nigerian citizen. But here you have also said categorically, and as a matter of fact, that the problem, one of the major problems of the banks, is that government at subnational level and even at federal level have borrowed monies from these same banks and have refused to pay back. I recall under the administration of Buhari, the administration went as far as going into the pool of the pensions funds to borrow trillions without a clear plan to pay back. So I'm saying, if we draw a matrix of priority, should, as beautiful and as economically sound as recapitalization is good, should the priority really be recapitalization or forcing government institutions to pay back monies to the money deposit banks so as to strengthen their capital base? That has been my argument. But you are free to defer.
You are quite on point. Two things can happen simultaneously. Don't forget that as we talk about government borrowing and not paying the money deposit banks, there is also issues around inflation that has also affected the value of Naira.
That is true.
And of course, part of the rationale why the immediate past CBN government of Emefiele actually embarked on e-money was to reduce the cost of maintaining the paper currency.
Yeah, the paper fiat.
Yes. As you will know, these currencies are printed by a different institution and at a huge cost.
True.
It's not the CBN that has the machine through which it prints money. It's outsourced to Nigeria Printing and Minting.
Security Printing and Minting Company.
Security Printing and Minting. And in some instances, we are even told that these currencies are printed abroad. So the issue then becomes, what is the value, the cost of maintaining this currency that is in the vault of the banks? So while it is quite true that Nigerians have largely embraced electronic transfer of funds and have also improved significantly on what I would call digital money.
Yeah.
Arising from the whole
cashless policy.
Yes. That the cashless policy that Godwin Emefiele forced down our throat, which has now made everybody, including those selling pepper and onions, now carry
POS machines.
They now carry a POS
terminals. Yes.
To ensure,
which I think is a good thing anyway. But go on.
Do you know I've used POS to buy newspaper, 200 naira newspaper.
Is it not convenient for you? Don't you like it?
No. What I'm saying is that part of the larger problem that banks face is the maintenance cost of our currency.
Yes.
Because aside from the fact that it comes at a huge cost to print each of those currency,
yes,
they also have a lifespan. And that's why you see that after a while, some of those currencies needed to be sorted out and burnt.
And few new ones printed again. Yes.
With new ones printed.
Yes.
Unfortunately, even the new currency that was purportedly used to replace the one that were arrested have not circulated well enough. And so the whole argument, my brother Shegun, is that I agree with you 100% that it's a two-way thing. Why recapitalization is good, part of the recapitalization agenda is for these banks to sell shares to the members of the public.
To expand capital base. Yes.
To expand the capital base. But it's not limited to that. It's also to ensure that states and federal authorities who are owning these banks also pay what they are owed. owing to the banks. Because when on paper you are said that your bank is worth 550 billion and your liquidity is half of that amount, then there's a problem. Because and this is part of why Governor Emefiele ended up printing over 22 trillion in ways and means to Buhari administration. You recall that early this shortly before the handover of Buhari, the National Assembly, particularly Senate, have to approve in arrears, have to approve the ways and means of over 22 trillion. That was ways and means you go and print money.
Yes.
That you have not had in order to maintain some measure of liquidity. Now we are facing that challenge. We are facing that challenge of ways and means, and government is not alive to its obligation of repaying these money deposit banks from whom many state governments have borrowed money to pay salaries and to improve infrastructures. Because usually what the state houses of assembly and the federal legislature does is to approve the borrowing plan of the president or the governor, as it were. Now, when you have a borrowing plan and you said that you are going to pay back, you are dealing with a ceteris paribus situation, all things being equal. All things will never be equal, as you know. All things will never be equal. So you find many state governments defaulting in their repayment to their money deposit banks that have helped them to raise money. I recall that there are some ventures where some state governments coerced banks operating in their state to fund. And any banks that fail to support that initiative, those banks will be blacklisted and will not be allowed to hold government funds. So it's a very dicey situation. But I quite agree that multiple efforts have to be made. One, to recapitalize by selling shares. I hold some of the bank shares, although it's worth next to nothing now because of devaluation. And many of these banks are not even paying dividends. So, but as it were, they need to recapitalize in order to stay solvent. And let me also say this, Shegun, it's not peculiar to Nigeria if banks are having issues. Did you know that in US, 2 banks were distressed this year alone? 2 banks were distressed, and they have to be bailed out. So the bailout fund
through the Federal Reserve,
US government under Joe Biden has approved is what has saved some of these banks in US. So it tells you that it's a global challenge that is faced by financial institutions. But what I'm saying is that it's a two-way thing, if we can put it that way. Why banks I agree that there should be recapitalization. There should also be repayment of
what they are owing.
Yes.
Because governments are the biggest lenders from these banks. If you check all the debt profile from each of the money deposit banks, government has the highest chunk.
So the government at whatever level, federal, state, or local, needs to pay back what they are owing these banks so that these banks don't go under. And I think it behoves federal government and state government to rather resort to foreign lending rather than fishing in a small pool like the Nigerian financial institutions, because it pays you better to go to Exim Bank of China to borrow, or to Afrexim Bank of Egypt to borrow, than to be borrowing from local banks where the susu money of you and I are kept. And then when it is time for us to withdraw our funds, the internet bank suddenly develop fault. You will not be able to make transaction. And then if you go queue at the banks to collect your money, they start telling you have to wait they are having technical problem. There is
All
no
the
technical
time.
problem.
All
The time.
it even got so bad. It even got so bad. Normally, you know, for mobile banking, when you're doing transfers, there's a limit with which you can do transfer. Once you want to exceed it, they will either tell you to send a request for a token or a PIN. It's that bad that even banks, when it gets to that level, they will disable. So when you want to make a transfer that is higher than your limit, you ask for token and PIN, it will never come, and they will tell you it is technical issues. But
and let me also tell you this.
Yes.
This is end of the month. Usually transfers made during these last few days of the month
And towards the end of the year, yes.
They want to keep their balance sheet
Their
healthy.
base, yes.
And so when people make withdrawals in the last few days of the month or early in the new month, it affects how the
Yes.
regulators will see their
Exactly.
balance sheet. So maybe they disable those applications. You just find out that you will not be able to make transfer.
You won't be able to do
on
anything.
The 20, on
and
the
they keep
29th,
apologizing
30th,
that it's technical hitch and that they are working on it.
So it's a lot of reform that needs to happen. A lot of reforms need to happen in our banking sector.
I quite agree with you. I quite agree with you. Okay, anytime from now, I don't know whether we already have the live feeds, but anytime from now, we expect that the 2024 budget will be presented to the joint National Assembly by the President. I think 27.5 trillion or thereabout. Now, there is a medium-term objective also of making Nigeria a $1 trillion economy, but our debt profile is a serious issue because it is rising. In one breath, the president wants to present a budget. In another breath, he's already asking a few hours ago whether he can continue on the spending. Kindly speak to this whole scenario vis-a-vis, side by side.
Quite unfortunately, I hear a lot of cacophony of voices that says, that the new borrowed plan was part of the 2022 to 2024 borrowing plan,
yes,
already approved by the National
Assembly.
But at the same time, our debt portfolio is moving from about 87 trillion to 94 trillion now. With the new borrow plan. And
Yes.
the question you ask yourself is that, are these justifiable? Should we continue on this borrowing spree? Are we having value for money? Have Tinubu administration, for instance, been able to reduce cost of governance? The answer is no. Shagun, the answer is no.
Exactly.
The cost of governance remains very, very exorbitant. And, I share with you what I wrote in my column in the Punch of last Wednesday, where I was looking at the financial recklessness of our political leaders.
Exactly.
And you will have thought that for a country that is heavily dependent on borrowing to service even payment of salaries, to service infrastructural development, that our prime target and the prime target of Tinubu administration should have been how to considerably cut down the cost of governance.
Exactly.
But that has not been the situation. I mean, I refer you to that article I wrote last Wednesday.
Yes.
Titled Financial Recklessness of Nigeria's Political Leaders.
Elites, yes.
When you look at that, I raised a number of issues. And one of it is that in one breath, we are engaging in squandermania, profligacy. The political leaders are profligate. And in another breath, the country and even the governors who are heavily indebted, who are engaging in these frivolous spendings, are states that are heavily indebted. So how do you reconcile? In one breath, Lagos State has 1/6 of the entire total debt of states in this country. But look at the profligate spending of the government of Lagos State. One vehicle, one bulletproof vehicle to be bought for 400 million naira to serve in the pool of chief of staff to Lagos State government. Then ask yourself, how much does the car, the official car of Lagos State governor, how much will it cost? If just one car in the pool of chief of staff of Lagos State government cost over 400 million, just one, not two, not five, not 20.
So
one
the executive governor, how much will his car cost?
How much will the car of the deputy governor cost? How much will the car of the speaker of Lagos State House of Assembly cost? So what I'm saying is that in one breath, you want to borrow more because you say you want to fix infrastructure.
Exactly.
Assuming without considering that that is a very sound argument. But why are we not reducing substantially the cost of governance? Why are we not blocking the leakages in the system? A lot of leakages still happens in the oil sector through the illegal bunkering and oil theft in the Niger Delta region. There are so many unremitted revenues of federal government by some of the revenue generating agencies who, rather than remitting these funds that they have generated into the federation account, would rather remit whatever they deem fit as operating surplus. And this culture of impunity is robbing the entire country of huge revenue source. There are a lot of leakages within the system that is yet to be blocked. I cited the example of Joint Admission and Matriculation Board. How will you know, Segun, will you have known that JAMB is a revenue generating agency for federal government of Nigeria?
Honestly, a lot of people would not know.
If not for Professor Ishaq Oloyede that got to the end of our affairs and have been remitting billions of naira every year. You understand? What about the immigration service? What about the customs? Are they remitting all that should be remitted?
Nigerian Ports Authority especially.
FRS,
yeah,
NIMASA,
the Nigerian Ports Authority especially.
And several other revenue generating agencies. Are they remitting the actual amount that they should remit, or they are falsifying their records in order to trap some of the funds? You know, look at the aviation sector. Today we are talking of federal government of Nigeria owing foreign airlines huge sums of foreign currency that should have been allowed to remit, that they should have remitted. That's why Emirates Airline quit operating from Nigeria. That's why British Airways also, because their funds were trapped in the vault of Nigeria. So what I'm saying, without much distraction, is that while it may not be out of place, people make argument that, after all, we still are within the bandwidth of borrowing. Revenue borrowing. Borrowing to GDP is still within the threshold that is permissible. But what about our revenue to GDP?
Okay.
We are talking of borrowing to GDP. We are not talking of revenue to GDP. In other climes, people cannot evade tax so easily as we do here. You know, the number of people who are paying tax is one of the lowest in the world, not only in Africa. And people are not encouraged to pay tax because of the luxurious lifestyle that our political leaders live. How could you be asking me to pay tax when even the revenue that you share every month cannot be accounted for? I said part of what I said in my column last week was that about 27 states asked this life pension for their governors and deputy governors. Some even extended it to speakers. And this is a country where there is heavy borrowing to service government. Why can't we cut down considerably on the cost of running this government? Why I've raised this issue on this platform? Why does President Tinubu have to appoint 48 ministers?
Exactly.
You yourself can see that not all the ministers that are in reckoning in the last 3 months of their being at the saddle are not more than 10.
Probably not really even up to 10. Yes.
No more than 10.
Exactly.
There are so many you don't even know exist and that they are in in this administration. So you just created just for boys. When last have you heard anything about the Ministry of Steel Development? Huh? What have
but
you heard about Ministry of
he was very vocal when he had to defend his boss before politics. But that's an argument for another day. I like the fact. Yes.
Have you heard anything about Ministry of
Mines and Steel Development? Yes, of course.
So what I'm saying is that I'm not saying they should be making noise. Even Ministry of Blue Economy, what has been the impact of Ministry of Blue Economy?
Exactly.
In all of this.
Exactly.
You know, so you just find jobs for the boys. I feel sad that in this kind of economy that is hemorrhaging, where we do not have enough revenue to service our debt, that is the same economy where there is high level of rents. You understand?
Yes.
It is in the same economy where there are jobs created for the boys who just live large on the economy.
No, but aside that, I think the Federal Character Act or whatever also affects, because if you look at the policy for appointing ministers, you must cross the whole 36 states of the federation. I personally think, although my opinion it really shouldn't carry weight on the program, but I personally think 36 ministers is already too much, and of course the cost of governance will always increase. But moving away from there, I'd like to, because we've been talking bank debts and economics and the econometrics and how good or how terrible it has been, let's quickly look at the National Assembly. Jarigbe complained recently that each time they invite some of the senior officers of ministries, departments, and the agencies of government, especially at the federal level, that most times they do not honor, those invitations, especially when it comes to come and defend the money you have taken from this special fund to do so and so projects. Recently they named some companies that include Dangote, oil refinery, Greenville, Nova Gas, and even the Delta State government. And Jarigbe kept complaining that even some few weeks ago they had sent numerous letters that the best they've done, especially the NNPCL, the best they've done is send inconsequential representatives, and most times their presence or whatever they are going to say to the plenary or to the Senate, before the Senate, most times are innocuous. They are of no effect. They are of no consequence. The question is, how can we change that system and culture of senior officials of ministries, departments, and agencies coming to the National Assembly, especially when they've been invited? Because the Constitution actually supports the function of the National Assembly as oversight functions to be able to investigate and do all the necessary oversights to ensure that people or public office holders are doing the right thing. How can we begin to make sure this trend changes? Under Buhari's administration, it was very terrible. We are beginning to see those signs again in this new administration, Mr. Jide.
Well, for me, it's a two-way thing. Yes, the National Assembly has power to invite, but where these institutions fail to call, you also have the right to oversight them by going to their offices. You understand? If Mountain will not come to Mahomet can go to the mountain. But situations where I've seen is that there are too many committees in the two chambers that every week this one wants to be seen working, this one is inviting this minister, the same minister is expected to be in the committee in another chamber, and there is no harmonization of thought.
Because everybody wants to outdo themselves.
Whether they can even have a joint committee sitting.
Yeah.
Exactly. So because they have committee funds, they want to be seen as expanding these committee funds. So rather than them harmonizing their effort and having a joint committee, you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
The Senate and the House committee can sit together
Yes.
and invite,
especially if it's for the same
listen.
purpose
But
or similar
rather,
purposes.
This
Yes.
committee on upland will be inviting the minister today. Tomorrow, the House of Reps committee wants the same person to come and answer. So at the end of the day, there is a lot of distractions. That's one. Two, if they are not coming, you can lodge complaint with the secretary to the federal government, who is actually, technically speaking, the head of the administration.
Yes, the secretariat of the administration.
So you can also make your complaint. Luckily, Senator George Akume is a former senator. He's a ranking senator, aside from being a former minister and now secretary to the federal government. So he has seen, and he's also a former governor. So he knows the challenge and can actually help to streamline this tension between the National Assembly and the leadership of the MDAs. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are. You are making a lot of sense.
If the secretary to the federal government is not pulling weight, then you can ask the leadership of the National Assembly to meet with the president to give these people marching order for compliance. But the first step would be to meet with the secretary to the federal government and let us see whether there could be harmonization of this invitation, that there is a joint committee of states, of the House of Reps and Senate sitting together to engage the leadership of MDAs. Not that today this one is inviting the same minister, tomorrow another committee in the House of Reps is also inviting the same person. At the end, if they fail to come, you can go to them.
Mr. Jide, in as much as what you've said make a lot of sense, and you have placed it in a very, very clear and understandable way. Yes, the committees are competing against one another. The committees have access to committee funds, and everybody wants to be seen to expend it. Some of the committees want to be seen to be working more than the other. So there is no sort of harm.
To actually issue a memo to the leadership of all the ministries, departments, and agencies, providing guidelines of when and how the interface between the ministers' report to and administrative department and agencies with the approval of Mr. President.
That's who are you talking about now? Are you talking about the secretary government of the federation? Who exactly are you talking about?
Secretary to the federal government.
Okay.
I'm saying secretary to the federal government.
Mr. George Akume,
can take, because like I said, the National Assembly can compel arrests of any erring leadership of MDAs, and they do have the power of the pulse. Remember, during the tenure of Goodluck Jonathan, there was a madam Ote.
Okay, Aruma Ote.
She was
Security Exchange Commission.
Aruma Ote.
Yes, Aruma Ote.
Security and Exchange Commission.
Yes.
Who failed to appear, and what the National Assembly simply did was to give us zero allocation in that year's budget. Zero. And after the leadership of MDAs will come forward to defend their budget, and this is the time that the National Assembly can hold them by the jugular, because they know that failure to go and defend your budget could hand you the wrath of the National Assembly and make you to get zero allocation. So many of the assembly, the leadership of committees, now when it has to do with appropriation.
Okay.
And this is the time for them to mend fences and to see how they can streamline and smoothen relationship between the two arms of government.
And secure their ministries, departments, and agencies, as the case may be. Okay, real quick, let me see whether I can drag you to the arena. The same oversight function of the National Assembly allows the National Assembly to also summon the president. We've seen cases under the Buhari administration where the National Assembly has summoned the president and he has blatantly refused. Does the National Assembly also have the same right to offer or issue a bench warrant to who? the agencies that the president himself has appointed? How does that work?
You know, you times there are powers you cannot exercise. Compel Mr. President to come. You can't issue a bench warrant to the president because he symbolizes the leadership of the country.
Okay.
Apart